is Kenneth Lukwagalason, your host, and today we'll be looking at the sole importation of fuel products by the Uganda National Oil Company. Now, we know towards the end of last year, Parliament of Uganda did amend the Petroleum Supply Act, and then they decided to give the sole responsibility to the Uganda National Oil Company to import all fuel products. Now, they explained the advantages, but there were also voices questioning the move, and those were largely people were saying that the monopoly would be dangerous for this country. Well, the Uganda National Oil Company did start that task, and then fuel started coming in from Kenya. So today we have an official from that organization to come and explain to us what exactly is going on and whether the advantages which were propelled then have actually been felt or are actually being felt as we speak. Of course, the interest of the consumer is cheaper but quality fuel. Let me introduce Mr. Tony Otoa, the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at the Uganda National Oil Company. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us on Spectrum.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me.
All right. Now, Tony, I've hinted a little bit on the background to why UNOOC is now the sole importer of fuel products in Uganda. But maybe you have a much deeper background. Can you kindly share with the listener?
So Ken, you totally understand how crazy it is when we have any disruptions, how it is for your transport, for you to move about, but also for you to be able to do business efficiently. That is because fuel in the country is never at the right, the right stock levels, okay? So what has been happening and why this was very important is to make sure that, number one, the security stocks in terms of what we need as a country to operate optimally at all times is at its right point. Now, as you know, we've been having situations where you find, many petrol stations running out of petrol or diesel, and because of course, interruptions in the neighboring country, be it riots or whatever, but also because of, the capacity of some of the suppliers to have as much within the same time. So what we are simply doing is to see, number one, all these stocks are clearly in country at all times. So all oil marketing companies, and I will call them OMCs, oil marketing companies, are sufficiently stocked to be able to support the end user, number one. Number two is also to make sure that at all times we are cutting out what we call the middleman. You see, what was happening before is that you had about 3 different players before it gets to a Ugandan OMC or oil marketing company to sell to you. Now, by cutting out those 2 or 3 entities, because now we are dealing with our partner Vito and getting it directly from the different areas in the Middle East, what that now means is that we are getting it directly into our Ugandan market through the Ugandan oil marketing companies and serving our country. That means at all times we have the right stock. Number 2, we have the sufficient stocks that are needed to be able to sufficiently operate. But most important of all, it should also reflect on your pump price. And I think that is a very, very important aspect here.
All right. We'll be digging deeper on those particular issues. Let's now take Ugandans a little bit in the journey. So how is this actually happening? When did you start and what is going on with that process?
Right. So in July, we brought in the first 2 vessels. This was Martinez and Martinez and Navigate 8. And what these did was to bring in 2 types of products. PMS, which is petrol, and then Argo, which is diesel. So I'll just call them diesel and petrol, just for the listeners' benefit. And what we did was to bring in stock that was required by the oil marketing companies and ready to get into the Kenya pipeline companies' pipeline, all the way to Eldoret, or Kisumu, Eldoret and Kisumu, and of course the different as well access points which are within the route into Uganda. That has been happening so far. We have now, 4 vessels that have come through so far, which is a great, story, meaning that there is consistency, there's continuity in how we are doing this. We have really synchronized on how we are working with the oil marketing companies. There's no complaints so far. And I think that is a huge endorsement to UNOOC as a national oil company, your Ugandan company, taking on this mantle to do a great job.
All right. So this fuel, where are you buying it from? Because there's also a debate around that, where you're buying this fuel and at what price, and at the end of the day, what are Ugandans actually getting?
So there are many points of purchase. Middle East is the biggest area. I mean, if you think about globally, we most of the entities or areas where you can actually get this product from is the Middle East. So you'll have sometimes Saudi Arabia, sometimes Bahrain, sometimes UAE, and all of these areas, and that's where we're getting it from. Now, these first consignments come from the UAE. And what you are seeing here is an opportunity, again, for getting it at a reasonable price, which we have negotiated, by the way, long term. Okay, not that we are negotiating per ship, but long term, to make sure that for the next few years we have a reasonable way of dealing this and it coming consistently into the country. So yes, it's from the Middle East at the moment.
All right. One of the things you raised that you say this process helps the country to deal with is the issue of the middlemen. When you talk about the middlemen, very many people will point to Kenya. Apparently, they're not so happy with what happened. At one point, there was even a threat to take the government of Uganda to court. Is that where your fingers are pointing, the middlemen in Kenya? Are those the people that you're talking about? Or there could be other people between Mombasa and here who have been the middlemen?
I could just call, anyone can be a middleman, and not necessarily a Kenyan per se, or Kenyan business, but anyone can be a middleman. But ideally what you see is that if you look at the companies that were importing oil or oil products into the country, most of them were foreign companies, okay? Most of them were companies that were either registered in Kenya or some other place. So what we have now is a scenario where we are the ones importing it. So we've taken it away from them, and now we are doing it ourselves. But let me ask you, Mr. Lukwago, if I took away what you normally eat every day, and I find that the best way for me to make it more beneficial to me is to bring it in myself, wouldn't you be aggrieved?
I would, depending on how you've gone through the process.
Absolutely. But all of this will settle down with time. And we are confident it will settle down with time. These are teething problems. And I can tell you for a fact what we are trying to do. Number one is to take care of our country in terms of the needs of the country. We want at all times, we have enough stock in this country. We have reasonable amount of stock. We have reasonably priced amount of stock in the country. And by the way, we have negotiated it so well that if you went to any of the oil marketing companies today and asked them how much they're buying it from us today and before, you'll actually find out that they're telling you good stories. So there's no complaint so far. Otherwise, right now, in these last 2 months, you would have been hearing a lot of them complaining about the price. So clearly, you can see that by eliminating the different levels in the supply chain, we have actually made it more beneficial and more efficient. And I think this is something that we need to celebrate as a country.
All right, let's look at this issue of the security of stocks. Of course, it has always been a debate on that issue. Even when the Parliament was considering the Amendment Act, there was a big debate in the House there, and people were pointing to the national reserves and saying, look, they're always empty, nothing is there. When you talk about adequate stocks, are you able to quantify how much that is, how much we consume as a country, maybe on a daily basis, and how much oil that keeps on coming in, the fuel products? And does this mean that we have some sort of security of stocks in our national reserves?
So as a country, on a daily, we consume 7 million liters of combined product. Okay?
7 million.
7 million, both diesel and petrol and any other. 7 million, okay, as a country. Now what that means is that we need to have, in a month, if you can do 7 times 30, I'm not very good at maths, but you can just do the maths. That is 7 times 30 is
200 and something.
210, right? Okay, 210 metric tons of product. Okay,
210 metric tons.
Yes,
coming on a monthly basis.
No, I'm saying if you're using the daily consuming rate. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So now what has been happening, of course, is as UNOOC has been managing the ginger storage terminal. We are now undergoing the planning and construction of the Kampala storage terminal, which will be over 200 metric tons. Okay, over. What this means is that you combine the two, in a month, if they're filled up in a month, they can actually hold a great buffer. But remember that all the time, within the month, we have product coming in. Okay? We have product coming in. Meaning that at no time do you get any shortages. Now, for now, of course, there are challenges because Kampala Storage Terminal is not yet up and running, okay? But I can assure you that with what is coming through the Kenyan pipeline company and also what we are intending to come or bring through the Tanzanian route, we're definitely going to have enough stock that can actually sustain us while we are getting ourselves set. But most important of all is that the Ginger Storage Terminal, which is a 30,000 metric tons or capacity, will be sufficiently taken care of. Meaning that at all times, you can have stock that can actually give us a buffer of at least 2 weeks while we're getting stock in. So there's no cause for alarm. And I think for me, this is what's really key. Can we consistently get this product to the people? Yes. Can we get it to the people at a fair price? Yes. Can we make sure that we are actually giving it to them in a better way than before? Yes. And I think that is what's really key.
Right. Staying with the ginger reserves, when you say UNOOC is the one running it,
yes,
what does that entail? Because there's also a debate there on whose products is actually in the terminal. We are told some of it is actually rented out. As you talk about you having the buffer stock, actually this stock actually belongs to the fuel companies, and therefore it's not entirely yours.
No, so let me explain this.
And the idea behind the reserve is that, some people say you need to keep fuel for at least a certain period, let me say 6 months, in case the country is in a crisis. We have to resort to.
Let me explain it.
Is that the approach?
So there are two ways to look at this. Before, that was the case when this was being run by another entity and not UNOOC fully. Okay, so where companies would come and put their stock in there and take it out. These are companies that probably bring in so much stock and can only use a certain amount during a certain period of time, then take it out. Now, UNOOC is fully in charge of that terminal, and that terminal is going to be very crucial for buffer stocks. Buffer stocks are stocks that are completely and directly owned by UNOOC to be sold or to be dealt to the oil marketing companies if need arises. Okay, if need arises, but in all ways of thinking about it, it's not just Ginger Storage Terminal. Mahati Terminal has also been set up, but I don't know if you know about it. You know, it's actually interesting.
Recently
very
inaugurated by the president.
Absolutely, very great infrastructure. That is another opportunity as well. Another terminal to add on to the one in Ginger to add more stock or create buffer stocks in this country. So I think for me, there's no gloom. This is a great opportunity for this country in terms of how we are looking at this resource.
So for clarity, when you look at the chain of supply, the way you're purchasing and supplying the fuel to the different oil companies, you're suggesting that there's a volume that directly goes to the oil marketing companies, and there's a volume that goes to the terminals, which is untouchable.
Yes. So what is going to happen and what is already happening or what has happened, I'll just tell you what has happened in the last few weeks. Oil comes in from Mombasa, okay? When it comes in, petrol or diesel, right? It goes through the pipeline, Kenya Petroleum Pipeline, which has different embankment routes, but then the main ones that we're using are Kisumu and Eldoret. Okay? And once they get there, these oil companies simply fill up their trucks and bring it all the way to the country, to Uganda. That's what's been happening. But also, interestingly, when it gets to Kisumu, you've been seeing MV Mutebi, bringing the product to the Mahati terminal. Okay? That's also another route that has been used, which is, again, another route which is, in a way, slightly less cumbersome because they are using barges on the Nile, on the Lake Victoria, which means that you're, shortcutting in a way and delivering to Kampala in time and efficiently. So in all ways, there are several routes that we've been using.
All right. You talk about oil companies picking with their oil trucks, and it has also been a point of concern. And at what point people thought actually this would also be dealt with? Do you see us actually stopping relying on these oil trucks? Because the challenges that come
with the environment. Absolutely.
Not only with the environment, even the infrastructure itself, but also the associated risks, including accidents.
Absolutely. I mean, again, accidents are inevitable, and I'll be very honest with you. As a company, we are very much sensitive to the conversations around safety. But As a country, we also know that there are plans and conversations with the Kenyan government to have a pipeline coming all the way from Eldoret into the country. Okay? That will minimize any of the road usage by the trucks. Okay? That's the pipeline. Number two, we'll try and use as much the barges as well. That means that from Kisumu, you can actually have a ship, or a vessel rather, bringing this product into the country. But also the rail. And the moment we sort out the rail, and I think if you recall, when we were young people, a lot of product used to come on the railway. You know, Uganda Railway, all of those fuel tankers would come on a rail. There's also that possibility. And that's going to happen once we have the standard gauge railway fully operational. So those three options are very possible, and they're going to happen. And it's just a matter of time. But those are ways in which we hope we can actually eliminate a lot of the issues that you just raised in terms of, infrastructure damage and anything that might happen, including accidents.
All right, I want to take you a little bit back on the issue of storage. You talked about a new terminal that is actually being constructed. It will be interesting to understand what exactly is happening there and what value it adds when you look at the issues of managing and providing fuel products in our country. At what stage are you in terms of constructing that new storage terminal you're talking about?
So the planning has already been done. A lot of the land access has already been obtained. I think what is really sticking is just now the final, investment plans to go into it.
That's in Mpigi? Buloba.
Yeah.
Here in Buloba.
Yes. So in so many ways, this provides an opportunity, number one, for a centralized place which will be used for this product. I mean, it can get to any part of the country from that place in a very efficient way. But also, if we are using very much of the other infrastructures, including the barges, it's a very safe route or closer kind of facility. So right now, I must say, we are in, give or take, a very good up and running, good to go situation to start its construction. Give it another a few years, you will have something really amazing in terms of infrastructure that will be able to take care of this country's fuel resources.
Right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. My guest this evening is Mr. Tony Otoa, the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer, the Uganda National Oil Company, and we're looking at the role that UNOOC is playing, the sole importation of fuel products in Uganda, a role that UNOOC started carrying out July this year, and according to his submission so far, we are getting adequate and quality fuel products, but also in a timely manner. Now, the biggest question, of course, very many Ugandans want to hear you answer is the issue of the cost. How does this factor in? Because one argument that government made in Parliament was that this is going to actually make fuel cheaper. We want to see if there's any development in that area, and if you can give us a comparison, what is happening in other countries and what is happening in Uganda. Have you seen any progress, any positivity in that area? Because there's one thing you bring in the fuels, selling it to the oil companies, but the oil companies making a kill.
So you see, what we've done is negotiate very amazing prices, very competitive prices, and these are prices that if you think about it, very, very competitive. Very competitive prices in the sense that if you sell it to any oil marketing company, be it City Oil or Shell or Total or whatever, it should translate to the end user. Okay? And I think if you've noticed and you've been driving around, 2 months ago, petrol was almost 5,600, in some places 5,700. Diesel was about 5,300, 5,200. Today, many petrol stations are going below the 5,000 mark. And for us, this is a great thing. And remember, by the way, this year round, we had a 100 shillings tax on petroleum products. So this is a positive thing that despite that 100 shilling, increment, we still have, pump prices going down. And I think for me, that's a good thing. And again, it's very early days to say how much this is going to happen. But I can tell you that in the last 2 months, we are already seeing effects happening, positive effects. We can expect to see even better over the next few months. And I know that is a very important thing for any consumer because when we started up and we announced this, someone, posted, does it increase or decrease? And then, people were laughing and saying it decreases. But the truth is, it decreases. It does decrease, and it has decreased. So I think it's a great, for me...
what have you seen, fuel pump?
For many
what has been the reduction? What is the reading as you came to this studio today?
So I can tell you that for many of them that I know of, that I'm a consumer of diesel. Diesel was about 5,300, 5,400. Today, I'm getting it for 4,900, 4,950. That for me is a positive thing. It's gone down by close to 400 shillings or 300 shillings in most places. That is a benefit. But remember, like I've said, it's early days. It's like a baby. You don't expect a baby to start running and being efficient in the first early days. But clearly we are showing positivity and positive conversations or positive signs at the pump. And that for me is what really matters.
All right. One wonders whether you are taking any steps as a UNOOC to actually survey the market to try and understand what exactly is going on. What is your role? Are you playing any role in that regard to ensure that the customer is not being cheated? Are you doing any monitoring? Because if you are the ones bringing in the fuel, it should be also in your interest to ensure that
absolutely
people are not being cheated.
Yeah,
what are you doing about that?
Absolutely. We've held amazing conversations with the oil marketing companies, and that is for me a positive step. We've held conversations with these oil marketing companies, and they're appreciative of the steps that we have taken to make sure that they get this product into the country efficiently and on time and in a very competitive manner. Now, the thing that has to happen is a continuous conversation with them to make sure that this actually goes down even lower. We've agreed to actually have conversations with them on a monthly basis, which I think for me is a great opportunity. On a monthly, over 100 oil marketing companies in this country, on a monthly basis, sitting down with us, where we can actually tell them, this is what we want to see because this is what we're doing, and so on and so forth. And I think it's a positive conversation that has already happened. I can tell you for a fact, none of them is complaining about the price. So ideally, they should be able to do that. But let me explain again further about this price issue. All right. It's not UNOOC's role to manage price. You see, we're working in a free market economy. And in a free market economy, what actually happens is that some places will sell the product differently. You'll find an oil pump in my place in Lira saying, it has moved far, I have to pay electricity, my stuff, and so on and so forth. And people will usually add those costs onto that. But that is not, something that we encourage. It's kind of like I mentioned to you earlier, if you went to Rwenzori, for instance, for a mineral water, they will tell you that the reserve price of this mineral water is 1,000 shillings, okay? From Rwenzori. If you went to a high-end hotel in Kampala to drink the same mineral water, it will be sold to you at 6,000 shillings. That's what a free market economy does. It doesn't control the end price, okay? All right. But what we are trying to do for us here is make sure that we are in constant conversations with the oil marketing companies to make sure that at all times the Ugandan is gaining the benefits of us taking charge of this opportunity. I don't know if your example of the mineral water bottle actually serves its purpose in this discussion, because you seem to suggest there's a reserve price. Are you saying there's a price above which oil companies should not sell at the pump price? No, the pump price. Again, back to the free market. So there's a sell price. We sell it at the same price to every company. All companies are sold a uniform price. Now, what the companies do is after you've sold to them is another thing. But the beauty about this is that it's the same product because we are guaranteeing its quality, meaning that you can drive to the nearest petrol station away from you. And there's so many petrol stations in Uganda, by the way, in a radius of less than 500 meters. Okay? So you have the opportunity to actually go to so many other great stations that are actually selling the product cheaply. Have you had an opportunity to drive out of Kampala, probably, and bought fuel on some of these petrol stations that are on highways? Yes. You compare the price here and there, it's not the same. And to me, I think that's cheating, because if you're selling the price, if you're selling to them at the same price, and then there is no control, and the consumer is actually being cheated,
from an upcountry petrol station, it means that there's a problem.
Interestingly, you'll be amazed. Upcountry petrol stations actually sell it cheaper.
No.
I was in Ginger last week.
Ginger is not upcountry. Ginger is an urban area with a multiple points of supply.
Okay. Let me explain to you why that upcountry one will be expensive. The upcountry is not an original OMC. So he's also buying from another oil marketing company. So he'll have to put his costs. Let me explain this simply. If I go to Madivan to buy Kakira sugar and I bring it to my wholesale shop, my 50 kilogram bag, okay? And then I start selling 10 kilograms to different small retailers, okay? I'd say each kilogram at 3,500. What happens when they go back to their remote areas where now the access to this sugar is even harder? They will put up the price, which involves transportation and so on and so forth. But you see, Kakira sugar has sold you at a good price and has sold it uniformly to all wholesalers. But it's not Kakira's role to go to the last guy, the last consumer, and make sure that's happening. You see, and that's the problem with the free market economy. So what we are saying is, we want to get you this product and we are bringing it in at a competitive price. We are giving it to the public at a competitive price. And what we are also emphasizing is we are working with the oil marketing companies to make sure that that competitive price goes down to the last user.
All right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. It's at that point when we go for a break. But when we return, we will continue with Mr. Tony Otoa, the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at the Uganda National Oil Company. And we're looking at the sole importation of fuel products by Uganda National Oil Company, which was given that mandate through an amendment of the Petroleum Supply Act by Parliament towards the end of last year. What are your views? Do share with us on our WhatsApp line, 0703-090-090. Now stay with us. Spectrum continues after these messages. Well, thank you very much for staying with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. Today we are looking at the sole importation of fuel products by Uganda National Oil Company, and my guest is Mr. Tony Otoa. He is the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at that entity, which is a government of Uganda company entrusted with looking into the commercial interests. Is it the commercial interests?
Yes, absolutely.
Of the oil and gas sector. Well, Tony, we keep on discussing this importation of oil, importation of fuel products, etc. But then Ugandans also are excited to hear that this country is likely to produce its oil pretty soon. I don't know if we're still with the same date which was given to us towards the end of this year. I thought this would also be an opportunity for you to share with Ugandans in that particular context, because it's also your mandate to represent the interest of the government of Uganda, which is also the interest of the people of Uganda.
Absolutely. So much is happening. If you went to the Albertine today, I'm talking of Nyoya area, all the way down to Hoima, Bulisa, you will see a tremendous level of activity that is happening. So much construction ongoing. The development phase is right in its good phase. A lot of wells are, taking shape, and this is, of course, in preparation for fast oil. Now, the timelines for fast oil, right on time. We are still working with the timelines, and we are hopeful that all of these activities that are happening can actually build up to that. But I think, Kenneth, I want to take us to what's really key on these opportunities and development.
Okay.
The amount of Ugandans who are doing activities or participating in the activities in the oil and gas sector. And I think for me that's a good story when it comes to local content, but also the value that we are deriving from this. If you recall, when we had the exploration time, when the likes of Talo were here and so many others, we never had Ugandan companies or Ugandan entities that were benefiting as much. And as a matter of fact, so much opportunities and revenue ended up leaving the country. This time round, we have so many Ugandan businesses, young Ugandans who are employed in the oil and gas sector through this phase. Again, this is all working towards the development of our capacity as Ugandans, both in manpower and business service provision, to be able to, number one, create opportunities for this country, but also take on this resource beyond, fast oil. And I think that is a good opportunity. So right now, I can clearly say we are in a good race to the timelines.
You say we are in a good race. There are people who are saying that there's some critical infrastructure that is supposed to be relied upon to actually deliver this oil, which are not yet in place. For instance, the crude oil pipeline, you need it. They say so. You also need a refinery, which has not even been started on. How do you beat this timeline?
Let me explain that. So yes, we need the refinery and the pipeline, but you see, for fast oil to happen, we're talking fast oil. We're not talking of real constant production. For fast oil to happen, you will probably need the pipeline first. Okay. Now, the refinery is a very crucial project, because if it comes into play, we will not even be having the issues we're having now with the importation of oil products, because our own refinery will be producing for us in this country, So if you're thinking about, 60,000 barrels per day refinery, what that means is that you have an opportunity for Ugandans and the region to be served by our own refinery. Yes, it is not at the pace that the others are moving, but you see, for you to be able to get the first opportunity, which is the first oil, what you need most is especially the pipeline. And if you went to the Tanzanian side of the pipeline, where the biggest chunk of this pipeline is going to be laid, you will actually see that there is a huge amount of opportunity and work going on to make sure that we hit this timeline. So yes, we are in shape, we are in time, and this is happening. If you had a chance, and I don't know, have you been to the oil and gas region?
I have.
You have? How soon was this?
4 months ago.
4 months ago. I want you to go back next week or this week, and you will see how different it has actually changed. You will find that pumping station 1, which is for the ECOP pipeline, has already gone into play. In terms of construction. And you'll also find that the infrastructure needed, to get this oil from the different fields, be it Kingfisher or Tilenga, all laid out to go into the CPF area. So there's so many opportunities that are happening right now. And I think for many Ugandans, it's really to encourage them to go down and see what's happening. And people used to think it was a very difficult thing to do, to go and visit these oil and gas places. But you can see, Kenneth, you went yourself. It's an open place for Ugandans as long as you get permission from the Petroleum Authority and they give you authorization. You will enter any of the oil facilities that are in operation today. So it's not that, there's not so much going on, but I think I would encourage a lot of people to go and see. But also at UNOOC, what we have decided to do and to make sure that we have people understanding what's happening all the time, we are opening up channels to make sure that Ugandans at all times can get this information. But more importantly, besides the information, is to showcase what is happening real time to Ugandans. Be it young people, the school-going guys, or the business-oriented people, or the people that need to get into jobs. We're doing all of this for them. So UNOOC, ultimately, as a Ugandan company, taking care of our commercial interests, but also taking care of the interests of the Ugandans, is making sure that, number one, we are reeling in the right information in the right time to satisfy the needs and the demands of the Ugandans. And that is the reason why I'm here, for instance. Here to keep sharing and taking or putting out as much information as possible in a sector that some people thought was, kind of closed. Just to demystify that it's not closed, it's open for business.
All right, we have some comments already coming in from the listeners, and I'll begin with this comment from Moses, who is listening in from here in Kampala. He says, "Good evening, Spectrum. We were told oil marketeers, middlemen, were taking about 30% of the oil, and by importing, the oil price will come down by 30% because you have eliminated the middlemen. When shall Uganda realize the benefit of importing oil? All that benefit is going to individual pockets."
Yeah, no, I don't know where that 30% came from. I have no clue. I wouldn't want to comment on what I know is not a fact. 30% is a very, very high markup for any entity, and I wouldn't want to really comment on that because I know it is actually not a fact. Okay, it's probably an assumption, but it's not a fact. And you cannot expect that by instantly removing the middleman, then that 30% will happen. It is not 30%, and I have no clue where my brother got that 30% from. But no, it's not 30%.
All right, and maybe this begs another question.
Right.
Do you as UNOOC have some sort of a figure out there where you envisage the oil prices to actually go and settle? Because when you talk to Ugandans, they'll tell you before these oil prices went up, the petrol price per litre was about 3,500.
Yeah.
And you know, people keep on saying that once the oil price goes up in Uganda, even if more supplies come in,
it will never go down.
The price never goes down.
So I think that is a wrong assumption. And already in these last 2 months, you've already seen it's already going down. But you can see that from the time that we had the riots some time back, I think a couple of years ago, and also in COVID. Remember in COVID when petrol stations were running out of petrol or diesel and everyone was saying, go and fill up your tank and whatever. And they went up and never came back down as much as we expected. This is not happening now. What's happening now is you're seeing prices go down. And the beauty about this is that it's going to be very difficult for them to go up because unless something catastrophic happens, then that will happen. But right now, it's very difficult because, like I've mentioned before, we have the buffers. We have an extra route through Tanzania, which is going to be not only for buffer stocks, but also for importation of these products into the country. I can tell you, Kenneth, we will have product at a fair price.
All right. Somebody here, Benonfet Tunamasco, is wondering whether you have any regulatory role as far as fuel companies are concerned. And he's even talking about a fuel storage facility located in Banda. He says it's in a slum, and in light of the Kitezi incident, he's raising concerns whether it's safe enough. And of course, there's so many people who have been complaining about the mushrooming of petrol stations in around the city, all over the place. Absolutely. And people are saying if there's a fire incident, the whole city is likely to be engulfed. And we are told there are regulations, meters within which a fuel station should not be closer to another. Do you have a regulatory role?
So UNOOC is a business entity. It doesn't have the regulatory role. However, the regulatory role can be played by, entities like, Petroleum Authority, which at the moment is only regulating the upstream, the developments in the oil and gas region. Okay?
The production
and so on and so forth. However, if anything happens or if something positive happens in the future or if anything happens in the future, you could have probably Petroleum Authority regulating as well downstream. What that means is that they then take on the regulatory arm of that. We are not a regulatory body. We are not a regulatory arm. We are simply a commercial arm.
Well, that listener, Benonfet Tunamasco, is again adding on another question. It says, are you sure that the fuel prices are low because of the new importation protocol or it's government's fear of protests?
No, absolutely, they are low. Why is everyone fascinated about protests nowadays?
Well,
no. They are low because of UNOOC's contribution or UNOOC's participation in this sector. And I can tell you, it's early phases. Kenneth, I want to come back here in the next 2 months and you tell me if the price you have seen today as you're going home is the same price you will see when I come back in 2 months. I can guarantee you it will probably go down. So I'm optimistic, and I know that these are early stages. In anything, be it business, it's early stages. But it's just like a child. You can't expect a child to be as efficient as a university kid in the day one, It takes time, it takes a process. But the beautiful thing is that even just in these 2 months, we've demonstrated how robust we are, how prepared we were, and how prepared we are to even do this further.
All right, David writes in and says, all we want from the national oil company is enabling a consumer get fuel at a cheaper price by putting a ceiling on how much oil companies can sell. Why hide behind open market economy and condemn the citizen when the law was actually amended to give them the monopoly to handle all fuel issues?
Right, to import.
Import, you import a product which eventually gets sold.
Absolutely. But like I said, and I'll repeat this for my brother again, the regulatory role, is not a UNOOC role. Now, in most countries,
I thought there's a multi-stakeholder approach to oil issues. As UNOOC, you must be working with the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development. You must also be working with the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. You have a system. You must be having a sectorial approach to actually doing issues, and therefore certain things should cut across.
Absolutely. But just like any other ministry or any other sector, you will find that when it comes to the business part of things, or the things that are outside the ambit of the operations or the regulatory part, there's not so much, there's not so much control. But I just want us to state a fact here as well.
So who looks at the price?
So you see, in many countries, you have what they call a consumer protection unit, which usually is housed in the Ministry of Trade. Go to many countries, you'll find this, where these units go around the country making sure that prices of items or products are reasonably priced for the consumer to enjoy. Now, that is what we need to be pushing for. That is what we need to be calling for. An entity that can say, this is not the right price. I mean, you remember during COVID when salt prices started rocketing, and it had to take the intervention of the president to actually, even make some arrests of some people who were selling these products exorbitantly. What you need is a consumer protection entity that can actually support and regulate or support in the moderation of these prices. But that is not the role of the Uganda National Oil Company at the moment. And if it were, it would actually make work a lot easier. But our mandate right now is to make sure that we have enough product into the country, or bring in enough product into the country at a competitive price, and to make sure that all times, Ugandans are benefiting and satisfied with the product that they have in the country.
Right, to Muhaise Kenjojo seems to have almost the same comment there. He's asking whether is it possible for you to set a price above which a company should not sell? And maybe I should ask you, have you heard of anywhere in the world where there's a price ceiling?
So where you have it in the different countries, you will have it where a national oil company owns petrol stations. Okay? So if UNOOC owned its petrol stations, say UNOOC imported and owned its petrol stations, we would then be selling it so cheaply because we would be selling it at the price that we're importing it in. These are now businesses we are selling to. Okay? So when you're selling to another business, what it also does is it factors in its costs. Okay? Electricity, workers, and so on and so forth. Okay? So that is what affects pricing in an economy, a free market economy. But in future, hopefully, I hope we can own our petrol stations, but that's what happens if you own a petrol station.
All right, there are quite a number of comments, and I'm going to do a marathon, so you can note them down. We have a comment coming in from a listener here who says, kindly help address the concept of fuel quality provided. It will help us understand the daily aspect of certain petrol stations having better quality fuel than others. It says, secondly, what's the whole point of cheapening importation price if the consumption price keeps being high? For someone that once bought fuel at 2,900 per litre, yet this supply was not only around Kampala. How do you convince me that there is progress when the price is still as high as it was last year? Thanks for educating us. I've learned a lot from this discussion, not only on oil and gas, but even business. Even Kasita should also come up with a price control. People doing business out of Kampala suffer a lot due to mess up of prices by Kampala city traders. Somebody else was, what's your role in terms of consumer protection? Isn't there a maximum price which cannot be exceeded? That's an issue we addressed there. Then we have another comment. One thing the government should learn from Total is the robust waste management implementation and follow-up. It's amazing. However, not sure where the waste is disposed, but so far, so good. That's Tumuhaise in Kenjojo. Then we have another comment. Hello, Radio 1. Thanks for the show. Greetings to Mr. Otoa. My question to Otoa, how much is UNOOC selling to the oil marketing companies for the three products, petrol, diesel, and kerosene? How much is their landing price in, say, ginger? That's a comment from Moses. Good evening, Ephraim from Wakiso. Why don't the government regulate the price of fuel? Because fuel stations are overcharging the buyers. And somebody else, Tricina, says, honestly, I don't see any tangible thing after UNOOC took over because pump prices have remained alarming. Anyway, I am not surprised with Ugandans who have middlemen up to Mulago mortuary. That's Rico there with that comment. Another one, now what we have, some cars of Euro 4 that don't accept fuel above 50, well, how do we know that our heartless Ugandans will not adulterate the fuel given the foreign parts that some cars have? Then he says, somebody else writes and said, why is government waking up to buying its own oil today when previously we were told that it was cheaper to buy in bulk with Kenya than separately as a country? Then we have another comment, but what is the threshold of saying fuel price is low? The low, I remember, is 3,000. That's a comment from Moses. And then lastly, good evening, Kenneth. If the government is selling fuel to fuel stations at the same price, why don't it make a follow-up on how it is sold to consumers or customers instead of overcharging them? Now, very quickly, we are running out of time. We need to run through this.
Okay, I'm just going to really rush into this. And again, back again to what I said earlier, a lot of these are really conversations that are going to keep happening with the oil marketing companies to make sure that, they are reasonable as well in terms of, fairly pricing their products. But let me just make an interesting fact here. Someone was saying going back to 2,900 a litre. Those days are probably long gone, and I'll tell you why. In Tanzania, which is next to the coast, where they actually have terminals and pipelines, okay, bringing in product, it's right now 3,100 Tanzania shillings. Convert that, and you'll see how much it is in terms of Uganda. In Nairobi today, it is 188 shillings for petrol. Do that times the rate of the Kenyan shilling to Uganda shilling. You will find that Uganda, Kampala, even as much as we are 630 kilometers away from Nairobi, we are cheaper. So I think Ugandans need to appreciate this fact. And again, the Baganda say kutambula kulaga. If you go to these countries, you will notice that as much as they are close to the coast, they are actually more pricier than us. It is a fact. So for anyone out there, if you have a friend in Nairobi, just tell them to take a screenshot, or rather a picture of a petrol pump station and see the price. Convert it with the current exchange rate. You will actually find that Kampala today, where petrol now is about 5,000, let's say 5,200 in most of the stations I've seen today, it's way cheaper. Okay? So let's be reasonable about that. Now, if you wanted to go to 2,900 like 5 years ago, and in the countries that are supporting us to import it into Uganda, then I don't know where where that assumption is coming from. In terms of fuel quality, I'll tell you that over 5 years ago, petrol and diesel were always adulterated using kerosene. And why was this the case? Kerosene was cheaper. Kerosene was almost half the price of diesel and petrol. So it was easier to get kerosene and mix it in these products. Today, kerosene is the price of diesel. In some places, kerosene is the price of petrol itself. So you would be very confused to get something that is the same price and add it on to, a petroleum product like diesel and petrol and think you're going to make a profit. So the instances of adulteration have really gone down. Of course, you can't adulterate with water. It doesn't make sense because the two do not match. But what used to happen was that a lot of the stations used to use kerosene, which was cheaper, mix it into these products and do that. But we are working hand in hand with our partner to make sure that we have spot checks to make sure that the products are quality. That's number one. We have intentions to work with UNBS as well to make sure that whatever is done at these petrol stations, hopefully in the future, is calibrated to give the customer a good experience. But again, UNBS now has to go in to calibrate a lot of these pumping stations. You see? Like how they go and calibrate mizanis. You can imagine if Madivani, who produces sugar, is the one now going to calibrate the mizani, the weighing scale of a guy in a different shop or supermarket or wherever. That is the role of UNBS, and I think UNBS does a great job at that. So this thing of Bankubi and Peo, I have not been given enough because of a Peo. That is not the role of UNOOC.
But the noise will get back to you.
Of course the noise will get back to us. And that is why we now have to work with our partner agencies like UNBS to say, can you go and do something about this?
All right, as we come to the end of this discussion, I'll give you an opportunity to make your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Kenneth, I think for me, it's really to say it's a great opportunity for Uganda. And I think Ugandans need to be able to number one, trust their own entity. UNOOC is a company that has amazing Ugandans doing things that we always thought were only for Bazungu. In the oil and gas sector, we never thought we would have Ugandans running a fully fledged company and making things happen. Amazing people who are making sure that, number one, we are making this country a good story in sub-Saharan Africa when it comes to the oil and gas conversations, be it upstream, be it the renewable energy conversations, the energy transition conversations, but most important of all as well now, the sole importation of petroleum products into this country. We want Ugandans to be comfortable, sleep very safe in the night, knowing when they wake up in the morning, they're not going to go to a petrol station which says, "Tetulina mafuta lero, tebagalese." We will make sure that that fuel is with the people at all times. Thank you.
All right, I must thank you, Mr. Tony Otoa, the Chief
Corporate Affairs
Officer at the Uganda National Oil Company. Thank you very much for making time to actually be with us on Spectrum. Looking forward to hosting you another time. You promise you will come back here again after 2 months to discuss the pricing.
Please.
Because like you've heard from the listener, it's still a teething issue.
Right. I'll be very honest with you. Things are going to change. But the beautiful thing is that if you have a lot of stock in the country, it makes things easier. And that's what we want to guarantee.
All right, with that, we come to the end of Spectrum. Thank you very much, dear listeners, for tuning in, but also contributing to this discussion. Up next, we have the news in English with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, we'll have the Soul Train with BB Jr.